We're pleased to welcome in one of our favorites, the New Orleans Times Picayune, NOLA.com's very own Jeff Duncan, who's also, by the way, Michael Thomas's favorite writer, which it has to be just a feather in your cap. Jeff, what's up, my brother? How are you?
Hey, Patrick, I'm doing good, man. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing great. But let's start there. How does it feel to be Michael Thomas's favorite writer? That's got to be something, right?
Yeah, I think I'll be at the top of his Christmas wish list. I'm sure I'll be on the list. Mike D is going to be missed in New Orleans. I think it's going to be interesting to see how his career, travels from here. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. That's about all I got to say about Mike Thomas.
I totally get it, my friend. I totally get it. Hey, let's talk about the schedule release, and then we'll get into the Saints a little bit and off-season and draft and all of that. Schedule release came out. You tweeted and basically said we'll learn a lot about this team in the first 5 games. The odds are already out, and they are underdogs in 4 of the first 5. Including Kansas City and Philly and Dallas early on. Tell me about kind of what you think of those first 5 games and how much of a litmus test you think this will be for a new offense and kind of a somewhat rebuilt Saints team.
Well, it's as front-loaded a schedule as I can remember. I don't remember them having this difficult of an opening stretch. I mean, obviously the home opener against Carolina looks like winnable on paper, but who knows? I mean, this time a year ago, we all looked at the schedule and said, oh, the Houston Texans, that's a win.
Right.
Chalked that one up, and you saw how that played out. That's the NFL, so you just never know who's going to fall off, who's going to rise up. So on paper, it looks difficult, but we just won't know for the Saints until we get into the meat of the schedule. You got a whole new offensive scheme, offensive coaching staff. There's going to be a transition involved with that. It has to be. But the same could be said for Carolina with a whole new staff as well. So a lot of uncertainty. It's going to be fun, I think, in some ways to watch this team develop because there is a little bit of intrigue with what's going to happen on offense.
It's interesting. And by the way, the schedule, Carolina at home, at Dallas, Philly at home, at Atlanta, and at Kansas City for those first 5 games. You mentioned this as well, I believe, that it seems like nationally – there's not a lot of intrigue. Like there's intrigue for us in Louisiana, and of course you guys down in New Orleans on the beat. But it feels like nationally this team is not getting a lot of love right now in terms of you. I think you pointed out a whole bunch of noon games. There's the one Thursday game with Sean Payton in Denver. But it feels like this is a team that is not pinging on the national radar very much.
Yeah, there's no question. It's been trending that way for a while, and I think that's to be expected when you lose a Hall of Fame quarterback and a coach as credentialed as Sean Payton, who had such great star power. This team's Q rating is just not what it was. You know, their profile's been lowered. They also haven't won a lot in the last few years. So they're definitely flying under the radar. Maybe that's a good thing with this team. I mean, there's been a lot of expectations every year. And they haven't been able to fulfill those expectations. So maybe lower expectations will allow this team to slip up on some people. I know Tyrann Mathieu talked the other day about that, and he said that might be good for this team. Just put our heads down, let's go to work, and let everyone else deal with the noise, and we'll just keep chopping wood. But look, this team I think has to be somewhat successful early on. I think there's a little bit of a crisis in confidence from the fan base with Dennis Allen. His first 2 years haven't yielded very many positive results. There's a segment of the fan base that's certainly upset with how things have gone. So I think he needs some success early on to kind of engender, trust and confidence from the fans, if not the locker room as well.
Obviously, we're not into really mini camps yet. We obviously are not anywhere near training camp just yet, but what's the impression you're getting from the Kubiak hire and kind of the direction of this offense? it seems like Dennis Allen has kind of given him carte blanche to come in and do whatever he wants. He brought in a lot of new staff members. There's some different pieces that are in there as well, especially with the offensive line kind of being, rejiggered a little bit. What is your feeling about how Kubiak and the offense is kind of coming along at this point?
Well, the early returns have all been very positive. I mean, that's natural this time of year. Everyone's undefeated. But I think there is, a definite undertone to confidence in what's being applied out there. I think this offensive scheme that Kubiak's bringing in has been proven around the league to be successful. But I do think he's going to tailor it, as a good coach would, to what he has available to him, what the playmakers are in New Orleans. In other words, this scheme isn't going to look exactly like they run it in San Francisco or the way they run it in Miami. I mean, it's all going to be tailored to the skill sets of a Taysom Hill or an Alvin Kamara. But one thing you hear over and over, attention to detail, the little things. I mean, that was a trademark, a hallmark of Sean Payton. And I'm hearing a lot of the same kind of buzzwords about Clint Kubiak.
Obviously, the offensive line is the number one question mark, and they obviously addressed it with the first pick in the draft. They've since done a little work in free agency as well. Where do you feel like this offensive line is heading at this point?
Well, Patrick, that's the biggest question for this team. I mean, it doesn't matter how good Clint Kubiak's X's and O's acumen is if they can't block anybody up front and keep Derek Carr clean. To me, that's the biggest question mark this team faces. They tried off season, obviously the Taliesin Fuanga, the new tackle. They brought in a number of veterans. Can they do it? Can they execute up front? And I think that's still a major question mark. I think there's reason to be optimistic, but I think also could see this thing being kind of what it was a year ago, where it wasn't good enough.
Well, Penning is to me kind of, he feels like the linchpin, right? I mean, it feels like this is the guy that has to make that leap. He started behind the eight ball with injuries early, and he never really seemed to catch up. I mean, it feels like this is the guy that has to show up in his sophomore season in order for this line to really be successful. Is that fair?
Yeah, and look, I'm not ready to give up on Trevor Penning. I know he struggled, but it happens a lot. Young linemen often come into this league, and it's a big jump, and they can lose confidence. I think he lost a little confidence, but he's a talented, athletic, big human being. I mean, there's a lot of clay to mold there for this new staff. I think having a new set of eyes and ears on him, a new way of doing things is going to be good, probably refreshing for him. So I think the Saints could have the potential to be a lot better up front, just because I think Penning himself will be better. And, when you have these two bookends, the potential there with Penning and Fuaga, I mean, that's a lot of human being on each end, and a lot of talent. I think there's reason to be optimistic for Trevor Penning to bounce back. I know that he's a reclamation project, but they put a lot of resources in. I know they sent him off to offensive line camp this offseason. They're committed to try and make that thing work.
Well, and again, coming into the season, the regular season injured is no way to try to start a career. You don't
Right.
really get an opportunity to get better at that point. So you throw him in kind of mid-season, and he's floundering a little bit, and you understand that. Jeff, this is obviously the draft. We saw kind of what they went and did. Any surprises from the draft? Anything that you didn't expect or thought perhaps maybe the Spencer Rattler pick? Anything that you thought was a reach or something of a surprise from the draft?
Well, obviously, I think Rattler was kind of curveball no one saw coming, including the Saints. I don't think they went into the draft, even day 3, thinking they were going to draft Spencer Rattler, but they stayed true to their process, and that is staying true to your board. And they had him graded much higher than anybody else on the board at the time when they took him in the 5th round. I think if that would have been a center or a safety or defensive tackle that was graded that high. They would have done the same thing. It just happened to be a quarterback who obviously had a well-known background with his work in Oklahoma and South Carolina. I'm eager to see him compete with Jake Haener. I think they've got two young, kind of intriguing quarterback prospects behind Derek Carr. I think that's going to be fun to watch all the way through training camp.
Do you think one of those two ends up as the backup?
Jake Haener. I think both of them are competing for the backup spot. Yeah,
Okay.
I'll be shocked if one of those isn't. And look, that's common around the league. I know the Saints have had a little bit of a luxury with the Jameis Winston, Andy Dalton, guys, the veteran guys in the past, Teddy Bridgewater. But I think that one of these young guns is going to get that backup job. And Derek Carr's been very, very durable throughout his career, but you just never know as you get up in the 30s, as we all do. You're not quite as durable. So it's going to be an important job for someone to win.
No, that's why I do radio, Jeff. A lot easier to be durable when you're just talking the entire time, and you don't have to worry about doing a whole lot physically. Talking to Jeff Duncan from the New Orleans Times Picayune. All right, schedule as a whole. Anything surprising? We kind of knew the teams that were involved. Anything that sticks out beyond those first five games?
Well, I think getting 3 primetime games is somewhat surprising, but as a network TV executive I talked to this week pointed out, the Saints are landing those primetime games mainly because of the opponent right now. Their brand is definitely lowered. They don't have the same profiles we talked about. But when you're playing brands like the Cowboys and Chiefs and Packers, and you got Sean Payton coming back to New Orleans for the first time, I mean, those are certainly marquee dates in the calendar. I do think the Saints' early schedule is going to be extremely difficult. Early on when I covered the NFL, Patrick, some NFL veterans told me schedule is like the most overlooked, underrated factor in a team's success or lack thereof in terms of when you play teams. A good example would be Carolina. It seems like, that's a good time. You're playing the opener, you get them at home, but it's also a little bit of a dangerous time because they got a new staff in. They're going to be certainly optimistic about things. They're going to be healthy. They got a little bit of a question mark as to what they're going to be running. I know Dave Canales, they have a little bit of a beat on them from Tampa, but 2 new coordinators, I think it makes them more dangerous than if you played them in week 13 and
Sure.
they're 2-11 and they're playing out the string. So, you play the Chargers on the West Coast after you have this emotional home game against the Denver Broncos in primetime. That's a tough game. That's tough to get back up and then fly across the coast against a team you're not used to playing very often. So how and when you play teams is vital in the course of how a season plays out.
Speaking of the Chargers, I think the consensus is they won the schedule release social media war. Their release was incredible. We're going to talk more about that on the show coming up. They also Zion Williamson caught a stray. I don't know if you saw that or not, but Zion was had a pretty sizable belly in their portrayal of New Orleans. Of course, Harrison Butker caught a stray that we'll talk about as well. But do the schedule releases do anything for you, Jeff? Is that anything that you care about? Because I kind of watch a few of them and enjoy them, but I think the schedule release is much ado about nothing. However, I do enjoy some of the social media work that's being done.
Well, it's become a thing, right?
Yeah.
Like 20 years ago, they just came out with the schedule. Now, like everything with the NFL, it's become so popular, and their mission to dominate the offseason, they've accomplished almost everything with that. With the way the draft is now. Like I told my colleagues the other day, it won't shock me if in a year or two they decide to have one round each night of the week of the draft.
Right.
And so they have 7 days of draft covered. I could see that happening as they continue to expand, look for new revenue. And I could see the schedule being something more expanded because of the popularity. Maybe they release, one game a day or something. Who knows the way they work? 1 week they have a schedule release by week. There's no bounds to NFL's, I think, quest to dominate the news cycle. And they're so popular. They are the Goliath of all sports franchises. But I'm not that much into the schedule release videos. I think that they're very creative. The Chargers one was amazing.
Yeah.
They're legendary in their work. But for the most part, I guess I'm old school there. I'm kind of like, okay, it's a schedule. Let me see where I'm going to be for the
send
holidays.
me the PDF.
Yeah, I'm just not that. I'm not that much into it. It feels a little inside baseball to me. Like I think that little world, they're into it, but I'm not sure. Fans are sitting around the water cooler at work talking about someone's schedule release.
You wrote the kind of the definitive books on the Breeze Payton era New Orleans Saints, and part of the Breeze Payton era the New Orleans Saints was obviously Steve Gleason, the block punt in the first game back in the Superdome. Even now talking about it gives me chills. And so obviously we know what Steve Gleason has gone through with ALS and kind of where he is. Well, you helped to write sort of the definitive book on that with Steve Gleason. Tell us about A Life Impossible and what the book is and kind of how you were able to get together with Steve and make this happen.
Well, Steve and I have been pretty much, our careers kind of mirrored each other here in New Orleans. I started my career covering the Saints in 2000 when Steve started as a rookie, undrafted free agent linebacker from Washington State. So we've kind of dovetailed here in New Orleans and became friends after he retired in 2008. Got to know him and his amazing wife, Michelle. He married a New Orleans girl. So we've done a lot of work together. I was honored to write his story when he retired. He and I worked together on the story when he was announcing his diagnosis to the public in 2011. So I think that comfort and familiarity with me and understanding his story and how Steve is such an honest, candid person. I knew how he'd want to attack this book project. It's the story of his life. It's his memoir, and he's still thriving. As I point out all the time, I mean, he's not surviving with ALS. I mean, he's living. This last couple of weeks, he was at Jazz Fest every day. He had an art exhibit he put on. We've been on this publicity tour for the book. He does more than most of us that don't have a terminal disease diagnosis. And I think there's a lot of life lessons in this book. I mean, it's a very emotional book, as you can imagine. I mean, being diagnosed with a terminal disease and then continuing to forge on like he has. He says, I'm 10 years past my expiration date is his line. And I've learned so much writing this book with him about how to live your life and in whatever adversity you have, whatever challenge you meet. You're not probably going to have a terminal disease diagnosis, but you're going to have something that challenges you, and how you attack that with what mindset and having a positive mindset. Steve taught me a lot of that, and I think anyone that reads the book will come away learning, I think, how to live life. I say this book's like a travel log for life. There's just a lot of different pit stops along the way that he makes in his life where he's encountered adversity and come out the other side every time.
Tell us how we get it.
Oh, it's available anywhere.
Okay.
Any local. I always encourage people to buy it at your local bookseller, support your local businesses, but you can get it on Amazon, anywhere online. It's a national book. It's with Knopf Publishing. It's the most prestigious publisher in the business, and we're just honored to have them on our team helping us promote this book, because Steve's story deserves to be told to the largest audience possible. And I'm really looking forward to spending more time with him on the publicity tour in the next few weeks. Hopefully we can get over to that neck of the woods and have a signing. I know we're going to have one in November in Baton Rouge.
Okay.
And we're getting over to the Gulf Coast again soon as well.
Well, I do hope you get an opportunity to get up here to the northwest corner of the state. Obviously, we'd love to have you. Jeff, obviously, enjoy whatever the off season is in the NFL these days. And hopefully you get some vacation time or something to get away and decompress for a bit. We look forward to catching up with you when we get closer to training camp and the season. Brother, thank you so much for giving us some time, especially on schedule release day. I know you're a busy man. Thanks, Patrick. Grateful to have you been on, and anytime you need me, just look me up, brother. All right, appreciate you. Jeff Duncan from the New Orleans Times Picayune joining the show. Pick up the book, A Life Impossible, Living with ALS, Finding Peace and Wisdom Within a Fragile Existence, written by Steve Gleason with Jeff Duncan as well.